Fellow Americans and friends, good morning and aloha. Aloha. What a wonderful day we have been given. What a wonderful day to remember and honor so much. I extend a special remembrance and aloha to our active service members and veterans, especially you, Mr. Albert. Thank you so much. We're honored to have you here again. Thank you very much for being here. Your service is remembered and honored. On this Labor Day, we remember and honor our working families all across our country, because it is them that maintain the economic, social, military, and democratic might of this country. They deserve to be remembered and honored today. And finally, to the board and staff and volunteers of the USS Missouri Memorial Association. By the way, my mother's from Missouri. She says Missouri, but I understand that's not permitted here. But I do have a special tie here. And she is up there in the mountains over there, 92. She's going to watch this speech later on and criticize my pronunciation of the state. You've cared so well for this living national treasure, and we thank you for that. We, of course, today remember the Missouri's service over 75 years, 3 wars, 11 battle stars, ultimately a symbol of peace where a great war ended, and fittingly moored next to her sister, Arizona, where that war started. It is so good to have Arizona open again, and we celebrate her return. We remember today the 74th anniversary of the end of that terrible war, a tragic war that claimed some 100 million lives, but a war that was brought to an end through the selfless sacrifice of the greatest generation. We also remember and honor a genuine American who did as much as any one person to end that war, General Douglas MacArthur. You know, his life still, to this day, remains the stuff of legends. First in his class at West Point, Medal of Honor winner, and nominated twice more for the Medal of Honor for gallantry on the battlefield. Brigadier General at 37, Major General at 45, Chief of Staff of the Army at 50, Supreme Commander of the Far East Forces in World War II. One of the only 5 five-star generals in our nation's history. Mastermind late in his life of one of the most successful amphibious invasions in our history at Incheon. And visionary, if you look back at his writings and speeches in those days, of urging that our country's role, our country's destiny lay in the Indo-Pacific. And we see that vision coming to shape before us today over the next generations. And I could go on and on the fascinating person that was General Douglas MacArthur. But today, of course, we remember and honor especially his return to the Philippines at Leyte 75 years ago. One of the most iconic moments in our entire history, and has already been noted, its roots lay in March of '42 in MacArthur's escape from Corregidor by PT boat in the dead of night, leaving behind General Jonathan Wainwright in command of a force of tens of thousands of Americans and our Philippine allies, for whom surrender, hardship, and death was a virtual certainty. I was in the Philippines just a few months ago. I wasn't there drinking San Miguel beer, although I think I had 1 or 2 there. But I was in the Philippines visiting with our embassy and our military there and inspecting our veterans' cemeteries there. And we flew over Corregidor on the way in from Singapore, and I looked down, and I knew that that was Corregidor, and I knew its significance. If you didn't know its place in history, you wouldn't really think much about what was down there. But for me, what occurred to me was, what could General Douglas MacArthur have felt as he left Corregidor? For any commander to leave his or her troops on the field of battle must be deeply searing. To be ordered to do that against all of your instincts. And what must have burned in him as he arrived in Australia, famously declared, "I shall return." And of course, he and we did, striding onto that beach, not just as a military move, but as a declaration of national resolve. And how fitting it was that on these very decks, 75 years ago, as MacArthur took the surrender of Japan, just two people stood right behind him: General Wainwright and British General Arthur Percival, who similarly had spent the war in PW camps after being required to surrender Singapore. Doesn't the life of General Douglas MacArthur in many ways reflect that of our own country? Forged in resolve and values, called to excellence and leadership, brilliant at times and deeply flawed at others, yet always striding forward onto that next beach to meet the challenges of this world. Yes, duty, honor, country. Sometimes I reflect that we live in bittersweet times when the living memories of World War II and those that served are all but gone. And in these times, it is more important than ever for us to remember and honor those that served there and their memories. More important than ever that we fix the lessons of that time as it actually happened, so that we do not make those same mistakes again. But can we find any lessons for the most basic goals of all, to assure we never see another world war? Are there really any lessons here for reconciliation and hope? Well, I'll give you one that's around us all the time: our relationship with Japan. We have Consul General Ito here. Every single year, Japan makes sure that it comes to our most solemn ceremonies. Every single year, Japan reinforces that we are friends, that we are allies, that we have enjoyed 2 generations of one of the strongest partnerships our country has ever had. And yet that would have seemed inconceivable at the close of World War II. That would have seemed inconceivable for at least a decade or more after World War II. And yet today, we take it for granted that Japan is our friend and ally. That is reconciliation. And by the way, we all know that also is in large part due to General Douglas MacArthur's wise stewardship of the occupation in post-war Japan. The other sign of reconciliation and perhaps hope is a mixed one. In the 75 years that have passed since the end of the Second World War, that era, if you look back over deep history, over thousands of years, has in fact been one of the most peaceful in world history. Now, that may be a sad commentary in some ways, given that there is so much war in our country, in our world, so much strife, so much challenge to overcome again, so much risk of another great world war. But that is nothing of the scale that engulfed our world in the great wars of the 20th century or previous. And as we take perhaps a kernel of hope from that observation, I think we need to also ask ourselves this question and to reinforce this thought. That didn't just happen. That was only achieved through effort. That was only achieved through strength. That was only achieved through remembering and honoring the lessons of that time and carrying them forward. So amidst so much to remember and honor today, we owe to all those who served and were lost in that Second World War, at least that, to remember that reconciliation and hope is possible and that their lives were not given in vain. Mahalo.